Alright, I have a feeling this is going to be a good one. I've been thinking a lot. But I wanted to address one more thing. The quadrisectional processing that I explained last episode is actually very useful for a variety of different things. I take care of my hair in 4 quadrants. When I wash dishes, I put a little bit of soap and a little bit of water in one section, and I wash it from quadrant to quadrant. If I need to repeat it, I can, but that's usually good enough. Instead of people addressing the entire thing as one and then leaving mass spots everywhere and having to come back to this pot and come back to this pot. Instead of using gravity and rotating things properly, you always got to be processing gravity whenever you're using any of your muscles in any way. Also, I don't hate people who are interested in pagan history at all. In fact, I could talk with hours and hours about pagan history and the history of Europe and things like that. There is no genuine revival in people who are lying about the history of Europe, in people who are manipulating everybody's ancestry in order to direct people, as I said, off a cliff. That's not at all what we're here for. That's not at all what our ancestors did. There was way more cooperation, sharing, integration, and diversity in European history than any freak. Whether they're some sort of a misinterpreter of Viking culture or some sick little neo-Nazi who's had everything that they know programmed by somebody they have never met and will never met. It's when you study the whole Curtis Yarvin Mencius Moldbug thing, it's like this guy was very obviously trying to be an anonymous screw tape type, pushing people to make the world better for him as he lurked behind the scenes. And it's very easy when you learn that through various theosophical movements, whether they're directly connected to the Masons or not. It's all about manipulating people's fantasy in order to get them to overwhelm the reality, be thinking way in the future, be thinking way in the past, lying about the past, having unrealistic fantasies about the future, scratching when they don't itch, and thinking bad thoughts when they don't need to. That's the entire point of that. And I don't care whether you're a neo-Nazi or whether you're a Democratic politician or whether you are a libertarian involved with an NGO or, just a regular guy. It's about good versus evil, and it's about individual choices. And I'd reckon that about 5 out of about 1,000 people are actually bad. They made the choice to consecrate themselves to the bad. And if you take out 4 of those from society, one of them will convert back to normal, and you will probably see even less overall. That's the entire point of proper policing, and what I think we managed to accomplish through Christendom for a period of time in order to build a society where people wanted to discover and learn and further science and further architecture and further art and further the ways that people express themselves and don't immediately pay out, but still brings life to the world and light to the world. That's the entire point of Christendom. This selfish, self-centered, I'm gonna live forever as long as I maintain my position on the hill crap has nothing to do with Christianity. It resembles more Islam, and I don't need to constantly hate on Islam, but there's no difference between that self-worship and the pre-Christian notion of an elect race. The Romans did terrifyingly evil things. They crucified dogs. They tortured people in mass. They had spectacles where they got off on the fear of people before they were devoured by animals, on the bloodshed and the wrath of 2 gladiators bashing it out. that is a sickness. And that sickness was defeated by the early Christians being so brave and so confident that they were willing to die excruciating death while people were originally laughing at them, but the people that laughing stopped laughing. They started to see, wow, that is a level of courage I don't even see in our greatest legionaries. I wish I was that confident when death is bearing down on me. And that is exactly why Christianity started to spread. You know, Constantine wasn't a 100% dedicated Christian. It was actually his mother who was more of a dedicated Christian. But Theodosius dedicated and consecrated the Roman borders to Christianity. And even though Rome collapsed because it was a contradiction and the elite pederasts, they decided to stop paying their taxes and the borders collapsed, that was fine. That was perfectly fine. Because Christianity was the new culture. And that was very, very good. I have a little bit extra Neanderthal in me. And anybody with a slightly bigger nose will have a little bit extra Neanderthalensis in them. I'm a big fan of history and genetics and stuff like that, and it's found out that if you got that thicker brow, you got that bigger nose, you tend to have a little bit more Neanderthal in you. Maybe it's because your ancestors were isolated, or maybe it's because your ancestors deliberately chose to isolate themselves. Regardless, you know, it's all good. It's all cool. You know, the Bohemian region, I've been talking about Bohemia a lot recently, it's actually scarcely populated compared to the more Moravian region of Czechoslovakia, which is Bohemia. And I found that interesting. It seems like the Bohemian region is still living more in a slightly more ancient time. And the Moravian region, they bought into more that Soviet system where you grew lots and lots of people and you put more factories in, and then it continued and continued and continued. You know, I found that fascinating. I don't really know what else to say about that, but you know, it might be that the whole system of kings and the whole system of patriarchy, this is very interesting, listen up, is a necessary illusion, because at the end of the day, women do know that they're better than men, that life would cease to be without them, that they are more intelligent in a variety of ways because they're more delicate. And so they have to be more intelligent out of necessity, necessity being the mother of invention. And so the entire system of patriarchy developed out of the king and queen system because women had so much power in society. And eventually, you know, it's you correspond this to today when we lie and say that women and men are equal, and that's when you actually get gender dysphoria. That's when you and it's individuals don't get gender dysphoria. Our entire society has gender dysphoria because euphoria means balanced, dysphoria means unbalanced. And when our society lies and says that women are equal to men and men are equal to women and women can be the heads of society, they already have a tremendous amount of natural pressure. And if they try to saddle that societal manufactured pressure on themselves, they will break down, and the fundamental level below them that is necessary for everybody will also break down. You know, I was just thinking that it might have been a potential spawning mechanism for patriarchy and for kings without queens. And over time, people just forgot that it was actually developed for a genuine reason and started to associate it like people always try to associate 100 years ago, you know, with grayscale, you know, everybody's miserable. Well, it's literally impossible for women to have like 10 kids if they're miserable. Like, their body won't allow it. They had to be happy, straight up. So when your grandmother did have, you know, 10 kids, it's because she lived a good life, actually. That's the thing, is people think that their little trinkets that obviously don't make them happy are the most important part of life, and therefore the last 60 years is the only time that matters. That's BS. The last 60 years have been one of the worst times in human history, I'd say. The only people, but, like, you know, MGTOW crap is insufferable. Good God. It's the same sort of crap that allows people to become neo-Nazis, because you're allowing somebody that you don't know, who you'll never know, to influence you tremendously, and most of it's lies. And so, as I said, single fathers do try very, very hard. But there's also the case of the guy who just decided to do everything wrong and be an annoying piece of crap, and instead abandon his family, get a motorcycle, and be an absolute douche. And, those people are everywhere. You see them everywhere. And they scream about Me Too and all this crap, but ultimately, Hollywood is a rape factory, and people have known that long before Me Too. And people are turning into men versus women instead of upper crust of LA society versus everybody else on the entire planet that they want to control. And by the way, Atlanta is the new LA, if you're wondering what's going on with that. And so, the only people I've ever seen actually talk about Me Too are people who manufactured a false and dishonest Me Too against me, saying that I was hitting on every single woman and harassing women on kiwi farms. Those are the only people I've ever heard of talking about #MeToo. So that's interesting. As I was saying, you get this crap in your head, and all of a sudden you're just lashing out on everybody around you. Just like if you watch Fox News, you're lashing out on your family constantly. Instead of or if you watch CNN, MSNBC, you say, why can't we stay in Ukraine for another 500 years? That's very bad for the cohesive family unit of the American society. There's an entire apparatus in our society structured around poor impulse control, gambling, legal prostitution, both legal and quasi-legal all over the place. Alcoholism, and recently weed addiction, and more poignantly than alcohol or weed, pharmaceutical perma-addiction. With alcohol and weed, you can choose to get off of it. With a lot of these pharmaceuticals, that's a permanent addiction, or at least until the 20 years until your body finally fails. If you're lucky. I've never met somebody on amphetamines that was smart or healthy. Which is wild, because I was actually on ADHD medication when my IQ tested for 154, but your IQ lowers as you get older. And, by the time I took 7 years of ADHD medication, I was seeing faces in empty cars, and I was terrified, and I was crying, and I was absolutely horrified of the dark. And I would overcome my fear of the dark 2 years later, after I chose to get off of it, A lot of people don't have that level of introspection, and don't have the parents that actually genuinely want what's best. Instead, they're listening to the greater scheme of things, and they're falling for the Neo John Money crap, and everybody suffers because of that, because the pain that their kids experience echoes into reality. Now, Ron DeSantis teaming up with overwhelming opposition to harrow the weak, like he did in Guantanamo Bay, is a factor of operating with fear instead of love. Fear is necessary, but it's the fear of the exact same thing he's setting himself up for, which is to be discarded. People are coming into my backyard and my state en masse, and have been for 4 years, thinking that DeSantis will protect them. But he cannot protect them from the problems they create. He cannot protect them from the city culture they're bringing here. He cannot protect them because he doesn't give a shit. He only cares about himself, and he's dumb enough. That's why I think he has Havana syndrome of something. To think that the people using him won't discard him like they did everybody else, like they did Nixon. Millions, if not billions, of people have seen what Israel has done recently. Not everybody is screaming about it constantly, but people see it, people feel it. It's a very small minority of people who think that that's normal. the chance that Israel actually comes through all of what they're doing right now, unscathed and successful, is the exact same chance that DeSantis had in 2024. It is a bunch of online lies. It's them, their egos talking themselves up, and reality hits you hard, bro. So don't be that guy, don't be the next DeSantis, and don't be some little creep thinking that you can escape your city culture just by moving. No, you have to attack it inside of yourself. You have to destroy the behavioral sinking inside of yourself. And not like the Californians I saw coming in here, like the New Yorkers I saw coming in here, like the Texas freaks I saw coming in here, inflicting that on the nice rural areas that you think will save you. You have to operate with growth, and you have to operate with love, and you have to be willing to take some hard steps and make some tough decisions that don't just involve outsourcing the pain to another human being. That's how you defeat the city inside of you. I know neo-Nazis work at CIA black sites like Guantanamo because they play death metal there. And not to hate all metal and heavy metal and stuff like that, although a lot of it I find annoying. Death metal is like 50... If you listen to death metal, it's like a 50-50 coin flip, whether or not you're a neo-Nazi, just based on my observations. And so, yeah, the Israeli-funded black sites all around the world, CIA-funded, Israeli-backed, Unit 731-style mass torture camps, and longest-running concentration camps like Guantanamo Bay on the planet. I'm sure that's an area where you can create more genuine Nazi-like people and inflict them on society. I don't believe that deportations or banning food dyes is going to hurt the economy as much as liberals say it's going to. But I know for a fact that the deportation portion of that, it's not about the economy. In fact, it's going to be good for the Texas economy because that's what the Texas economy is structured off of. But the philosophy and the spiritual place where our country is, I can tell you, based on how ICE operates since it was established on top of the corpse of the Institution of Naturalized Services, since it started to take work from Immigration, as they would call it, the immigration services. They run concentration camps. They run concentration camps, and they get $750 a day for every single head that they keep in their concentration camps. They keep them for long periods of time. During COVID in Arizona, they were gassing people until they were bleeding from their orifices. That is, if you continue that will expand and expand and expand. And it is not, because it runs off of money. It is not something that is exclusive to immigrants. And for that matter, if you want to immigrate knowing that that sort of a nightmare is waiting for you, you must be running from something pretty serious. In the Institution of Naturalization Services, there'd be a lot of people that were working very hard to determine if these people were just humble, good folks like you would meet on the street, that you would get to know, that would make your food and help you and be good for our society, and separate them from the absolute creeps that would carjack and sell drugs and breed pit bulls, bruh. I breed pit bulls, bruh. Hit me up, bruh. Those freaks. No love lost for them. I don't want Texas to turn into Neo-Gaza or Gaza 2 Electric Boogaloo. I want that strip to be on the Texas-Mexico border to be a giant concentration camp or a giant open-air weapons testing facility like Gaza was, past tense. Because, as I've been saying, through abject cruelty and murder, they've been liberated from their long torture. I can understand some people may be saying one thing or minimizing things because they know ultimately it was going to happen anyways. But if you're happy about that, if you can cheer about that, ooh, buddy, you are in a slippery slope. You are in a bad pathway. And I would definitely try and destroy the behavior sink inside of yourself that's allowing that to happen. You know, we almost hunted the great egret, this beautiful, elegant bird, to extinction in the 1800s because the Masons that made up our country were such evil pieces of shit. And we've been working real hard to get these things back up and going. Like the Sirenians have been extinct for a while, but we would protect manatees around here. You know, DeSantis actually got elected on an environmental platform, and then he 180'd on that completely. And in fact, it's the wildest thing. Instead of destroying large portions of our parks and nature preserves for anything of value, he's creating pickleball courts, little plastic balls of this invention in Washington. It's very un-American sport, and a very, very lame and poignant representation of a very lame governor. And I just hope that my suspicions are worse than reality, because if that happens, large portions of Florida will suffer well after DeSantis is gone. Off to be the next senator, because, like, if you put Rick Scott and DeSantis on a scale, DeSantis is probably a little bit better. There's lots of history to Rick Scott a lot of people don't know about, like how he managed to steal a tremendous amount of money from the Republican coffers before the 2022 midterm so that Biden had a mandate to do whatever he wanted, which was absolute and total obliteration of Gaza, 80% of which completely innocent, unarmed people, large portion children, large portion women, pregnant women. You know, talk about pro-life. That's not pro-life. Although I'm very happy, as I've said before, that he managed to continue the Trump policy. When Trump went and negotiated with the Taliban in person, that was incredibly brave. And instead of throwing that in the toilet because he wanted to spite Trump, he, who wanted to actually get out of Afghanistan during the Obama administration when Obama did the surge, got us out. And, you know, I'm sorry if your friends were a little upset that you made it in Afghanistan, but quite literally, if you are ordered to retreat and you say, no, I need to shed more blood, you have fallen to corn. It's as simple as that. Sorry, bud. And also the Saudi prince who was like hanging out of the plane because he was so stupid he thought he could ride it like a dragon. That was so funny. That fantasy, that immortality. That's exactly how a lot of those Saudi dickheads, UAE dickheads, actually believe. You know, the people that have destroyed 98% of their native populations and turned their places into gigantic, you know, Disneyland, but worse, attraction parks. That was funny. That wasn't a tragedy. That was hilarious. It was hilarious when Pentagon members were hyperventilating under their desks. Oh my gosh, this is the end, this is the end. You know? So what? They've made probably my life a little bit worse in the meanwhile, you know? They still lost because of that, because of Trump and Biden. And because Trump already did that, he's not going to go back on him. At least I hope not. And that's a little bit of silver lining in the Biden administration. In fact, the only silver lining that I really see. Matt Christman's brain is working again. Yay! So apparently I went back and I listened, and he had some stuff going on in his family life. You know, he just had a kid. And so the big old stroke that he had, it wasn't actually as debilitating as I thought it was. Yay! He's still very, very funny. But you can kind of tell, like, once out of every 5 minutes, he kind of just blacks out a little bit. You know, that's very common. It's much, much better than I thought it was, which is great. You know, I'm very happy. I'm very excited to continue to listen to Matt Christman in the future. My former priest gave valid criticism of Dr. Taylor Marshall, but he completely and utterly put Archbishop Maria Vigano in the dirt. And I think he did that just because he was just because Maria Vigano was a Trump supporter. And, you know, encouraged lots of people to vote Trump. My priest that said he likes to do abuse, he was more of a DeSantis fan than a Trump guy. And that's one of the many, many reasons why I was just like, I was willing to, you see, I registered from Republican to Democrat so I could vote in the Florida Democratic primaries against Joe Biden and for Bernie Sanders. And I've just never gone back to Republican because I was going to until in his own home state, Ron DeSantis got single digits against Trump, which is great, which is just wonderful. He even tried to overrule the old, standards, actually. He had a standard that he had inherited where if you're just elected governor for a certain time, you're not going to hop up to president immediately. But, during his debates and during his earlier, pre-governor political career, he never mentioned that because he really, really thought he was going to be the president. And he's a creep, and he has extreme cognitive dissonance. And I'm very, very happy that Trump is the president-elect and not Ron DeSantis. That's coming in a little bit. There's a potential of that coming in a little bit when the political process has been completely squeezed by AIPAC. But for now, Ron can stay in Florida and build his little pickleball courts. I have a theory. I think Elon blasting the ocean with heat with his rockets, because he's launched a ton of rockets, and blasting the air is one thing that gets carried around, but blasting the ocean is like heating that crap up. And it's been very, very hot, but it's also been a solar maximum. And there's been a ton of methane that people have been releasing, and I think deliberately. And there's been a ton of deforestation that's almost like sloppily, pushed forward. I have a theory that the extremely rich people, like Elon, who are up on their studies, know that next year is the year of the solar maximum of the solar cycle, and that they are heating things up even more so that they can march into the Arctic and mine it for resources, like Greenland, like the north part of Canada, like Norway and Sweden, and Russia too. And they wanted to take over Russia and get their resources too, but that's not happening. No, sir. No Russiagate. Not happening. So that's my theory. A lot of people in this hedonic treadmill, they start to figure out how they can cash out their life's loan for a lusty lump sum. And that lifelong loan would sustain them. But they want it now. You see? I've never been a fan of those tactics. I've never been a fan of that financing. I've also never been in debt. I've also never charged interests whenever I've lent people money before. And I am very happy about that. It's good on my soul. Every conspiracy needs a benefactor. You can't just they at people. You can't just they, them at people. Oh, they, Maybe natural cures they don't want you to know, because you know exactly in that reference, but still, you need to sharpen your points. You need to figure out exactly who is benefiting from each conspiracy, because there's always a benefactor, and if there's no benefactor, there's no sense in conspiring. And it's usually a very small amount of people. As I said, it takes 5 in 1,000 to really spoil the bunch. It's usually a very small amount of people who are undermining a vast majority of people. And as long as you can see these lines, if your brain has been programmed to light these lines up, it's very easy to see where the conspiracies are. And it's super funny that the news has pushed conspiracy as the new flat earth term, when everybody knows that the earth isn't flat, and everybody also knows that there are individuals that have conspired against the vast majority, and there are a bunch of little groups, and the more people can't beat them, join them, the more of those, groups there are. The more people try to form their little mini gangs. That conspiracy is the very mechanism by which capitalism and communism works. It's the very mechanism by which a traditional and cohesive society is broken down. And I don't say traditional as in fantasy traditional. I don't say traditional as in Pepe the Frog Templar traditional, okay? Like genuinely traditional, where we came from. things that we should be grateful for, that unbroken chain that we're part of, that at any moment could have broken, that people just willingly break. And that's why antinatalism is such a curse to be levied on people. Oh, please, 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 don't just shame people into their corners more. Try to convince them that they are part of a massive unbroken chain, especially the science people. They can extract that deep, deep, deep into the past and understand that the amount of luck that they have, that they're here right now, is amazing, whether or not they believe in a conceptualization of God yet. Because all they need is one near-death experience to change that, not just because they get scared, but because their near-death experience makes their brain dump DMT that launches them through the chrysanthemum of their perception, likely out of your anterior fontanelle in your skull. And then you see in a way that words can't describe. Now, the fact that Tim Waltz was in Hong Kong is a little sussy. If you know anything about Hong Kong is like a CIA port. And there's a ton of child trafficking that took place in Hong Kong, and it's terrifying. And that doesn't bode well, you know. Oh yeah, I could have helped people in Tiananmen Square, but I didn't. And that is even a lie. He wasn't even near there. Instead, trained at Hong Kong, on standby to help the Chinese government, you know, suppress their people for heroin. That's Tim Waltz, you know. And he was one of the better Democrats, for Christ's sakes, and he was creepy. Man, AIPAC has really messed our parties up. At least we have good people like Thomas Massie. God bless Thomas Massie, and God rest Thomas Massie's wife's soul. Oh. She died right after Thomas Massie criticized AIPAC. And that might have been like, you know, knew it was going to happen. And she's just like, give him hell, Tom. You know. Or some people speculating it could have been an assassination. I actually wouldn't put, you know, that much onus into AIPAC. They mostly go off of this like fiat currency crap where we like taken billions of dollars and flown it all over the world, and now people still pretend that actually that dollar actually matters. You know what the I in BRICS is? India. You know what the S in BRICS is? Saudi Arabia. Like, they're really setting up shop. With Russia and China, it's coming. It's coming. Oh, what else is coming? I'm pretty sure they're training AI with video games. I'm pretty sure that's why they have to have your video game plugged into the internet to play it now. Because they're training AI's intuition off of the split motions that happen in preset requirements in the video games. And that's how they're going to try to get people's like instincts under a coded wrap, which is very hard to do, as I've described. There was an old conceptualization of the brain's hemispheres back before we learned the compartmentalization of the brain, where the left hemisphere split things into cubes to try and define them, and the right hemisphere simply intuited them without needing things like terms, which is more divine language, as it were. And I talk about the amphibianism of being a thinking pile of clay. You know, it's very complicated, but they're trying to figure it out, and maybe it'll help us. Maybe we can use AI to fix all the massive pollution and to, you know, get things up and running, like for the betterment of mankind, instead of what we're doing right now, which is the conspiracy of capitalism and communism. By the way, I think kale stems taste like butter. You should probably try eating some kale. It's very, very tasty. And if your kale is bitter, it's good, because it means it's full of vitamins. Oh, and before I take off, there is a new Northo2 video explaining where herpes might have come from. It's a Paranthropus, and they date back to way before I thought human beings even came out of trees, which is the interesting thing. That means like it might have been some form of hominid 3 million years that was originally coming out of the trees from the tailless arboreal monkeys, and grew over time. People get really bent out of shape over things like that. They feel personally insulted by things like that, which is wild in my opinion, because there is so much time for change to take place, for a drastic change to take place. And the last 7,000 years of written history are very, very important. It doesn't mean that, like, we haven't been in the Eurasian steppe for 20,000 years, that we haven't been in India for 50,000 years, you know? It doesn't mean that God's earth isn't incredibly complex. And I feel like when you get there, it'll explain to you exactly how complex life is. It's nothing to be afraid of. It's nothing to be stressed about, except for the behavioral sink inside of yourself, that way by which you allow the emptiness to, instead of being a vessel for God, be a vessel for the world. And everybody knows that's just kicking the can down the road. Gotta think productively. Generate. Take care.